Welcome to Stitchery Stories, where textile artists share their life in fabric and thread, inspiration, techniques, disasters and delights. And I'm Susan Reeks, enthusiastic embroiderer and textile art dabbler who also loves podcasting. So take a break and enjoy our light-hearted chat, and please share with your friends so they can enjoy it too. Hello and welcome today to our lovely guest, Annie Crane. Hi Annie.
Hi, Sue. I am so happy to be talking to you today.
Oh, it's lovely for you to be here, Annie. And before I do anything else, what we're going to do is wish Annie a big happy birthday. It's a special milestone birthday for Annie today. So this is all really nice that we're actually speaking to Annie on her birthday as well. So happy birthday, Annie, from everybody at Stitchery Stories.
Oh, Sue, thank you very much. What a great present this is.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Right, let's go with Annie's bio. Sorry, I'm shuffling my bits of paper around. I'm not very organised today. So, my name is Annie Crane and I adore creating. This passion would manifest itself in non-conventional ways as a child. Casting my uniquely dressed Barbie dolls aside, I would build elaborate homes for them instead. I had a rich imagination and clearly remember the day I realised I could be and think anything I wanted inside my head. At the age of 13, we visited a craft show on the plaza in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and remember seeing a hippie girl selling her pottery. I knew right then what I wanted to be when I grew up, an artist. I didn't start creating art until leaving home to study occupational therapy. And having a quirky fashion sense, I began using markers to colour my tennis shoes rather than buying clothes, I'd alter the ones I had. After graduating, I moved to Santa Fe, found a job and began painting anything I could get my hands on, including sunflowers on the wood floors of my newly purchased home. I met my husband in 1994 and it was he who drove a reluctant me to the first store I approached to sell my art. Fast forward till 2011, my husband suggested we move my basement studio into the guest room upstairs and Coffee Fish was born. I saw my pieces in a shop downtown until last fall when I realised I had begun making only what would sell rather than creating with whimsical abandon. This period of COVID unrest has allowed me time to think. As I approach my 60th birthday, I am ready to grow into the life that's been in progress for years. I have something to say and share, and my work reflects loving despite our differences and sharing our stories rather than battling them alone. Currently, I'm focused on making textile journals, providing a place where others can tell their stories and express their creative journey. Oh, that's lovely. Well, really nice bio. Thank you so much, Annie, for sharing that with us. And as with any episode, then you can find all of the links and information and extra images for Annie on her episode on stitcherystories.com, and you can find her pretty much everywhere under the brand name of Coffee Fish Co. So I'm sure we'll come on to that as well. Okay. So welcome once again, Annie.
Thank you very much, Sue.
So before we get too involved in your stitchery story today, would you like to share with us what you're working on and what's got you excited?
Well, yeah, actually what's got me really excited is with this whole big change that we're all experiencing, I had lost, my creative, I guess I call it mojo. And so I'm excited to finally have gotten that back. So that feels really good. And I had a lot of unfinished projects. I've been creating a lot of journal covers. And so they're back out and ready to go. And in all the cleaning I've done during this time, I uncovered some projects that, have been laying there for a couple of years. So I'm excited to get going on those. I'm excited about being on Stitchery Stories. And having my 60th birthday today feels like a new beginning. So I'm very excited about that. Yeah.
It's really great that you mentioned about using this coronavirus lockdown and chaos as an opportunity to press pause really and think about what it is that you are doing. And obviously it's combined with a milestone birthday, and that always gets us thinking about what we're doing as well, doesn't it? So I really like the positivity that this has brought for you.
Yeah, it's my silver lining in all that's going on. And I'm a caregiver. And so I've been caring for my dad and my aunt. And this this period of time has changed that, because I can't see my aunt because she's in an assisted living, and, had to keep distance from my dad because the elderly are more susceptible. So I have had more time on my hands, and you're right. It's given me a lot of time to think about, where I want to go from here. How have things been going? And, I think being willing to step out and say, I want to spend more time on my art. That's been very apparent during this time of more time.
Yeah. And that could be the hardest thing, can't it, though, Annie, to give ourselves permission that we exist, that we have a life, that, we can spend some time doing embroidery or whatever it is that we happen to want to do. So it's funny about you saying that you've been doing more cleaning. I've never done less cleaning in all my life.
I should have said cleaning my studio. Yeah.
Well, that's more important.
Yes, cleaning my studio. Yeah, sorry. No, the rest of it is, gone to pot. Yeah.
I did say actually on Saturday, I looked around and I thought, oh my word, this looks like a bomb. Especially was doing a challenge with our embroidery group. So I'd spent like 10 minutes rushing around, pulling things out and looking for things. And oh, dearie me, what a mess. But when 15, I only live here with my boy who was 15. And he did turn around and he said, Mum, you have made everywhere a bit of a mess, haven't you? I thought, oh, crikey, it really is time to tidy up. The tidiest room in the house is his bedroom. Can you believe it? It is really tidy.
I love that. Our son is home now when he shouldn't have been. He had a job on campus, but they couldn't give him the hours. So that's an adjustment right there of, gosh, love having him home so much. But that's funny about the room.
Yeah. And as I say, giving ourselves permission that, we can do our art and we don't have to spend all of our time running around after other people, and that we do have a life of our own. And as you say, that you can build a business or change what you were doing. And I think this is something that several of our guests have mentioned as well. It's like, well, hang on a minute, I can take this further. I can take this in whichever direction that, that you want to do. So really pleased to be speaking to you at this point in time after you've had that period of reflection, I think.
Yes, absolutely, because I have always identified as a caregiver, and I naturally do, care for others. How are you doing? And I have to be honest, I woke up this morning and I said, I'm an artist who cares for other people. Not I'm a caregiver first, because going up to my studio and feeling okay about having fun rather than what does everyone need, that has been a real struggle in my ability to complete projects or even create in the first place. So, yes, yeah.
What a lovely and powerful thing to say, though, Annie.
Well, yeah.
That you have put yourself as an artist who cares for people.
Yes. Yeah.
And you've turned it around from being, I'm somebody who cares for people, and sometimes occasionally, if I'm really a good girl, then I might get time to do some art. Yeah.
Yes. And having your podcast be today on my birthday, well, I can't. That's big for me. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Right. So you mentioned there about knowing, as from being 13, that you wanted to be an artist. So where did the textile, how did you jump from painting floors and shoes and things? What was the leap that made you pick textiles?
Oh, the big leap was, I had painted tin, painted on tin in Santa Fe, and it's, it's loud, cutting, and I was diagnosed with a rare inner ear syndrome called superior canal dehiscence syndrome. And it basically causes all kinds of debilitating symptoms, and mostly just sound. The sound of my voice, the sound of my eyes moving, the sound of my heart beating, my husband clearing his throat. So sound became almost excruciating. And I actually had to wear headphones just to mute that sound. Well, once I had the surgery to correct it, and unfortunately there was difficulty with the surgery, but when I came out of it, I still have a problem with sound. And so I love wearing bracelets, and they would clank every time my hand hit a table.
Yes, bracelets are terrible for clanking, aren't they?
Yes. And that saddened me. And all of a sudden I thought, I need to make quiet bracelets, something that won't make any noise. And my love of textiles, that's when it was born. And I began making textile bracelets. That was my first leap into textiles. And that was back in, I think, 2011. And I've been going with textiles ever since. And it's, of course, expanded into much more than that. But that was my beginning. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's a unique story. I haven't heard any story around that. But yeah, I can imagine if sound is starting to be a painful occurrence for you, all those clanging bracelets, that would really drive you up the wall, wouldn't it? So,
yes.
Yeah, that's interesting that you started with silent bracelets. I really like that idea.
Yep. It's wonderful to be able to wear them again.
Oh, yeah. I should imagine it is. You really like creating those. So you've obviously had an artistic background, an artistic flair, and then you adapted because of your ear problems, I suppose, your hearing. So
yeah.
Had you really done anything with textiles before you came up with the silent bracelet idea?
It's funny, holes in clothes that I actually needed to mend because they just looked unsightly in public. I've always actually didn't mind if I had holes in my clothes that people couldn't see, because in a way that was a way for my artistic expression to escape. I have a rich inner life, and I react to things big, and it was a way to let that escape without being too much for people. So those holes that I needed to mend or wanted to, way back when I was in 8th grade, I was trying to mend a hole in a pair of shorts and using embroidery. I don't even remember how I learned about, floss or embroidery. And my gym teacher said, I love to embroider. Would you mind if I took your shorts and embroidered on them? And so I let her, and what she did was beautiful. I wish I'd kept them, but it was just so beautiful. And so that was, into embroidery. I've always had a floss around ever since then.
You need to embellish, I think, really, looking at the drawing on your trainers. What do you call them? Gym shoes, is it?
Yes.
Tennis shoes, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, drawing on your tennis shoes and mending clothes.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That's the real thing, though, again, now, isn't it? Kind of artful mending. I've seen quite a lot of things on Instagram, I think, where people are putting lovely flowers around holes, and, the whole embroidering your jeans and jeans jackets and stuff seems to be kind of coming back in. God, I sound old when I say that. Anyway, it's true.
Well, and I do have a pretty great story around that. I had a wool sweater that I absolutely adored. And I worked as a traveling therapist in very rural New Mexico, which I loved. But I had sat too close to a fireplace and burned a hole in the back of my sweater. But it actually wasn't a hole. It was just a burn mark. And I thought, that's okay. I'm just going to work, So I wore it to work. And one of my students, I was an occupational therapist, so one of the kids I was working with, she said, "What's that on your sweater?" And I said, "What?" And I said, "Oh, I sat too close to the fireplace." She goes, "Well, it looks like caca." And in Spanish...
like in France, yeah.
yeah, or the SH1T as one of your guests.
Exactly.
So that was funny. And that actually was the first time I ever used applique. I went home, I found some material, I cut out a big heart and stitched it onto the hole because I was not willing to give up that sweater. So, little ways textiles have found their way into my life. Yeah.
Yeah. So therefore, having that creative path and using art and painting on tin and stuff, what would you say, though, Annie, have been major inspirations over the years? And, what do you find inspiring at the moment?
Oh, well, this was a fun question because, as caregivers, you don't tend to think about, where I came from in thinking about this, it was wonderful because I did not grow up in a textile or crafty family. But what I did get from growing up, which was so amazing to realize, was we were always on a treasure hunt. My dad was always, ghost towns, flea markets, thrift stores. We were always searching for treasure. My dad was always asking questions. If we would camp a lot as a kid. We'd go on vacations. My dad was always asking about questions, And, you get 25 cents if you spot the first wildlife. Or so I grew up hunting for treasure. And that has been a big part. I've been collecting treasure since I was young. And I have all that treasure in my studio ready if I need it. So that was big. Yeah. So that, and my aunts and my grandmas created, because every Christmas, which I adore Christmas, my mom would say, well, your Aunt Mimi made this, or your Dommy made this, or your Sissy made this. And, so I knew that there was craftiness, but we never sat around a table and crafted.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was all done separately or different times, but there was still that creative thread running through the family, I suppose.
Yes. Yeah. I have a deep love for animals, for landscapes, Christmas, snow. I have a huge desire to see love and kindness, how good a cup of coffee is with a friend. All of that is inspiration for the pieces that I make. I can remember every piece I've made and what I was feeling when I created it. And so a lot of it comes from how beautiful it feels to, see an act of kindness or provide something for someone else to say, I love you. That really inspires me. Emotion. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that comes across in how you've then have been creating your silent bracelets, but also the journals. So how did that start?
It all started around story. There became a big thing about, what is your story, mm-hmm. and how hard it is sometimes for us to share our stories. Mm. So I wanted to make a place for people to share, just put their story down on paper. I noticed that when I feel something extremely emotional, I realized that if I wrote a poem about it, I felt better. So writing down in a way that it didn't have to make sense, the poem, but I could express that hurt. And I wanted to give people a place to tell their stories. And so I have just launched on that. Unfortunately, I love making the covers so much that it's hard for me to finish them.
Give them away and use them.
Yeah. I populate them with papers. I love dyeing papers and fabrics and all that. So I love that. But completing a journal isn't all that easy. But those journals have been a real, just a wonderful way for me to express my creativity. I love doing them.
They look so nice because you create the cover and then the inside you've got papers and you decorate and do different kind of pages and that kind of thing, which I thought was really, really super.
Yes.
Does anybody ever say, oh, it's too nice to write in?
Yes. I don't know if I can write in it, but I know that it'll come. I'm the kind of person that when I receive a gift, it has to sit there for a while for me to process it. So I understand receiving something and going, okay, I've got to stay away from you for a little bit before I can allow you in. So I get that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. And I was also going to ask you, so if you've been collecting treasure for a number of years, do you have like favorite things as well? Or what's the strangest thing that you've got? What sort of things have you collected?
Oh, gracious. Okay. Yes. Favorite. Anything that's vintage, old watches, old pieces. Right now I do a lot of dyeing my papers with rust. So rusty pieces in different types of shapes. That is wonderful. I will collect anything that I look at makes me feel good. And since I have poor balance since my ear surgery, I'm looking down a lot. And so, anything on the ground that sparks my interest, I'll pick up. My son loves Tabasco sauce, so bought him some Tabasco sauce, and he said, "Mom, look at the art on this cover, this box." And I looked at it and I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I need to cut that out and put it in, put it in my stash." But I have a lot of doll heads from dolls. Because, their bodies get all torn and wrecked and ruined. But I take the heads off. And some of them are in a drawer. Some of them I use to put on top of bottles where I store other bits and stuff. So
yeah,
that's probably the strangest. I love buttons and beads and textiles, old vintage textiles. All of it, all of the above, anything that makes me feel good.
So you've got quite a collection then. Is it a big room, your studio? Do you have lots of drawers?
Well, let's say when we moved it into one of the guest bedrooms, when my son moved into the basement, I moved into his room. Well, I had to grow. I grew out of that and had to grow into, actually, when he moved out into the basement, he was in the bigger room. And I did have to grow into it. And I've had to spread out around the house just because, and my husband's so good at just letting me explode pretty much anywhere I want. So my stuff is always, on the table he's an artist too, so that makes it really good.
Yeah, well, then you don't have that conflict, do you? About I can only imagine the absolute hell of being with somebody who's really tidy, or and you just want to be creative and be creative everywhere, and then there's somebody else just kind of nagging on in the background because you're making a mess everywhere, etc. That must be dreadful. I live on my own. I'm quite pleased about it as well, actually.
Absolutely. I don't know what I wouldn't be I wouldn't be doing my art today if he wasn't like that. Yeah.
Well, it knocks all the creativity out of it, doesn't it? Especially when you have to just keep defending your space. That wouldn't work at all, would it?
Oh. Yeah, and for the, I can explain it later, but for the highly sensitive person in me, to argue, neither of us can create. If we have a spat, it's like, okay, that's just ruined our ability to create until we come back. Aww. Yeah.
And do you incorporate the bits and pieces that you've found in your work as well? I posted last week, I'd actually finished a piece where we were using found objects in our embroidery skill workshop last year. And Alex Hall, I connected to her episode. I love the way in which she uses found objects. It's brilliant. I find it very inspiring. So I was just interested with all these things that you've got. Do you use them?
Oh, absolutely. And I really did after the bracelets, I moved into textile houses, and they were wall hangings, or I made what I called adornments, but they were large wall hangings. I can't use a lot of like big beads and stuff, or don't want to, on my journals, because then if they're writing, that will create a lump or a bump.
It's got to be quite flat, doesn't it? Yeah.
All of my treasures went into these houses. And, there I could use anything I want on them. So a lot of my, little antique jewelry, or, it just depends on what the piece needs. I'll say, oh, well, this would look great with, and then I'm like, oh, I've got that in some drawer somewhere. Yeah. And that's why I don't buy based on what I need. I buy based on what I feel. So my studio explodes it's got...
Oh, well, I'm pleased you use them, because well, there's a fine line, isn't there, then, between that and hoarding?
Yes, exactly. No, in fact, I even bought some resin, and it's in a drawer somewhere. And after your guest last week, I'm like, I've got to pull that out and use it somehow. Yes. I've got to, because that was, yeah.
Very inspiring, wasn't it? So what would you say then, Annie, given you love using all of your stuff, then what would you say your favourite techniques, and why do you like them so much?
Well, I'll pretty much try anything that I see other people using, like the resin. I love to use my scissors to cut. I will alter anything that I can get done with a journal, have it the cover completely finished, and I'll look at it and say, oh no, this just isn't right. So I recently did that. I made a journal called Daughter of the King, and I have a strong faith in God, and I wanted the journal to represent that. Well, I was all done with it, and I thought, you know what? I need to put some red paint on here. I needed to do that. So I did. The journal's completely done, and I put the red paint on there, and it looked bad. It was so bad.
Oh dear.
So I'm like, okay. And I put on a big pot of boiling water, and I just put the completed journal. I threw it in the boiling water. And I just let it sit there and boil for a while. And when I took it out, all I needed to do was, overlay some of the pieces. I didn't want it to be all one color, because that red paint had made the whole thing kind of a pink. So, I just needed to alter it, and I was pleased with it. So, I have lots of those stories. I love using my wood burning tool. And it has a attachment that gets like, penny-sized circle on it.
Yeah.
And I looked at a piece just the other day, and I was like, this needs some brown burnt circles, because I love this. When you grow up camping, you actually think of burning wood as a perfume, kind of. It stays in your hair. And
you do finish it with holes in all your clothes, especially fleece. I've got loads of fleece tops and stuff, and it's the same thing. Where's that hole come from? It's come from some bonfire. And you think, oh, dear.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so I wanted to burn some holes in the front of on this cover, and I went to burn the holes, and some thread had gotten caught underneath. And the minute I lifted it off, I'm like, oh, darn, that thread and then I looked at it again, and I'm like, oh my goodness, that looks gorgeous. And, those happy accidents that Ann Kelly talked about, I love. Yeah. So, as far as favorite tools, of course, my needle and thread, my heating gun, which I started to use more of it to see how different textiles melt, my burning, my wood burning tool. I'll just about use anything if I feel it needs something. Yeah.
Yeah. And you work mostly with hand embroidery?
Yes. I don't machine embroider. It's all by hand. It depends on what the piece needs. So I love doing French knots. I love a seed stitch, the whole Boro, Sashiko concept. I love that. But it's like, I'll look at it and I'll say, okay, you need a couple of French knots here. So I'll use whatever technique I've learned, and I'll apply it to my pieces based on what they need.
Yeah, because I was thinking, really, again, back to the noise thing, a sewing machine rattling away probably isn't the best thing either.
Actually, no, because I have a pair of headphones in my studio.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
and
yes.
all I need to do is put those on if it's bothering me. Some days it's better than others. If a storm's coming in, it could get very bad. So, I've always got those available. A friend of mine gave me a pair of noise-canceling earplugs. I need to put those on often when the space I'm in requires it, the noise level. And I carry them with me in my purse, so I'm always ready. I don't want it to keep me from enjoying it. Yeah.
No.
I need to put it on mute. Yeah.
So with coming to this as an artistic endeavour kind of later in life, and always putting yourself, behind and after everybody else, what has been the high point of your creative journey so far then, Annie, would you say?
Well, Sue, if I am serious, getting a chance to talk about what I have a passion for with you is big for me. So,
thank you.
Seriously, I can't lie. I stopped selling in the shop. I was selling my pieces downtown in Fort Collins at a cute little shop called, with a lot of vendors, called Walnut Creek. But what I realized is I was creating on what was selling.
Yeah.
And I'd done it for many years. And I finally said, I need to be able to create with Whimsical abandoned.
Yeah.
And so I applied for a Maker's Mart. And I got accepted. So getting accepted, because it was juried, they had to look at my work and they had to say, oh yeah, please join us. Yeah. So that was really, really big for me. And I am an introvert. So the thought of having to go to the Maker's Mart was very difficult. But my husband agreed to do all the technical part of it, if I sold something. And it was amazingly successful.
Right, lovely.
Lovely.
That
response to my work I was just amazed. That was such a highlight for me that, I actually, people like what you're doing, at least the ones that came to the Baker's Mart. What I also realized at that point is how much I loved talking about my love for textiles.
Yeah.
I remember every piece. And I was thankful. I worked slow, but having moved out of the store, I had a lot to sell. Just talking to the people that came up was magical for me, to just sit there and talk. And my husband took care of all the rest. So I was ready to have a glass of wine after.
Yeah.
And I met a woman that since we've connected on Instagram, and she loves to do art journaling. So just, having someone now that I can share. I really didn't before, except you and your ladies that you interview. You kind of were my textile friend. Thanks to the internet and having more time to spend on it, I've developed some really sweet friendships, even one over in the UK.
Oh, that's brilliant. And I really like the fact that, you were brave to apply, you were brave to go and take part in the event, but how validating it was for you, and the rewards that you got for your bravery, and saying, right, I'm an artist. And that must be a very hard thing to say.
Yes.
And a number of guests have all said exactly the same thing. It took them ages before they could actually admit to themselves, I'm an artist, people like what I do, and that's what I'm going to do. And I just, applaud you greatly for doing that. So I think that's a lovely highlight. Thank you for sharing that one with us, Annie.
Of course. I've always been a go-getter. If I see something I really want or need, like if I've ruined a piece of clothing that it's like, oh, I can't get rid of that. I mean, that's why I mend. It's like, no, you can't say this is over. And when I applied for occupational therapy school, I would not be able to go and start the program without having math or a woodworking class. And it was closed. I mean, they weren't accepting any more students into the woodworking class. And so I went and bought the books, and I showed up for the class at the first day. And I basically told the professor, I said, look, I've been accepted into the OT program. I need this class to start it. And he's like, okay, I'll put you on the books. So, when I see something that I really, really want, I'll go after it.
Yeah, you're a determined lady, definitely.
Yeah.
So you mentioned there about when you painted, used the red paint and finished up boiling your work.
Yeah.
Have you got any other stories around when things didn't go quite as planned and was possibly a bit of a disaster? And obviously what you learn from that is you try and do something with it, don't you?
Yes. And so I'm not afraid of disasters when I'm creating, because I'll just throw them off somewhere else and say, you'll find where you were supposed to be later. I don't throw, in fact, I pick the trash out of when I go to workshops, and this instructor will throw something, in a bin where she's done with it. I'll go pick it out. So I'm like, are you kidding? You're throwing away gold here. So anyway, one thing that's a disaster for me, unable to do commissioned work. The first time I was really asked to do a commissioned piece, it was a disaster for me. It was extremely stress producing and it was for a wedding. And it was someone that worked in the shop that I had my stuff in. And she says, I just want covers. My daughter's getting married and I just want covers for their vows. I'm like, oh, okay. I can do that.
Yeah.
So what do you do when there's a wedding? You collect part of the wedding dress, the flowers, the colors, all these things. Yeah. And I got them and I froze. And I tried creating based on what I thought she'd want. And it literally froze me. And of course, you want to do this for someone.
Yeah.
And what I realized through the stress that created for me is, doing pieces on commission, really, it's a disaster for me. So I don't. Yeah. But I had a young woman who had purchased a lot of my stuff. She said, the only thing I want is for you to create my wedding journal. And she knew me because she bought my stuff and we'd been communicating a little. And she said, I like color. Do your thing. I'm like, oh, yeah, that I can do.
Yeah.
If you say, I want a poetry journal, I like green, do your thing. That I have no problem with. But if the person has a lot, that they have a real vision, what they want it to look like, for some reason, unfortunately, I can't do that. So that's my disaster.
But that's a very powerful realization, because I think in whether it's art or the online world or wherever, if we don't feel comfortable about what it is that we're trying to achieve, then it's, as you say, it's not enjoyable, is it? It's not enjoyable. It is stressful. We spend 3 times as much time doing it and we still aren't happy with what we've created, etc., etc. So sometimes the most powerful thing that we can ever say is no, in a nice way, but we do have to learn the power of no, most definitely. So I'm pleased that you've found a way to think about doing those.
Yes.
Really, it's where you've got pretty much artistic license and a theme and a vague colour scheme, and off you go.
Yes.
If they're happy with that, then that's perfect, isn't it?
Yeah, then I can, as my husband says, coffee fish it. Yeah. Oh, this looks like it's been coffee fished. Or, don't coffee fish that brand new table we just bought. I mean, it's kind of like what would that be? A verb or a...
Yeah.
It's
a household verb now.
Absolutely is. Yeah.
Brilliant. We've got UFOs or future plans. How do you want to finish this off, Annie? I'll leave it up to you.
UFO's easy. I found some houses. I want to start working on those again. And future plans. Of course, I turned 60 today. So I woke up today, Sue, and I said, I'm an artist who takes care of people.
Yeah, wow.
So my husband started a website for me a long time ago. I'm ready to work on that. I'm ready to put myself out there. I'm ready to find the best way to share what I create with other people. I'm excited to actually go up in my studio and say, you know what? It's okay. You're here. Now create with whimsical abandon. And I'm very, very excited about that. So that's actually very, very new for me. New way to think.
Right. Yeah, a new way and a very powerful way to think. And I think the fact that you're now being very purposeful about you've accepted that you're ready. That is such a major point, isn't it? You've accepted yourself that you're ready. And now look at all the things that you're excited to create and get on with and move forward with. So yeah, I think that's really nice. I love that way of looking and facing forward with excitement.
Absolutely. And it's like, that 13-year-old girl, she knew what she wanted.
She's still there.
Yeah, she's there. She has been all along, but I'm ready to step in to the adult version of me, I guess, for lack of a better word. I don't know. Or us, anybody that creates their children at heart when they create, musicians, anything. Yeah.
Honey, do you know what? It's been absolutely wonderful speaking to you. I'm so pleased that we managed to get this sorted out. And I'm really, really pleased that we managed to get it sorted out for your birthday as well. So it's just what a lovely story. And I think what a brilliant jumping off point now with what you've achieved. And today is like you've made a lot of acceptance in your head.
Yes.
And off you go into the sunlight, sunset. I don't know what the word is.
I love it.
Off you go to your studio.
Yes, there we go. Oh, yeah. Thank you so much, Sue, for being like the beginning of all of this, the big start, I guess. Yeah.
Oh, do you know, it's an honour. It's an honour. Thank you very much. It's really, really nice. Oh, from Yorkshire, you can't say nice things to me. Brilliant. Right, Annie, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. And I'm sure people will, again, with all of our guests, will find it greatly inspiring because, do you know what? There'll be people out there listening who'll think, do you know what? I'm in that position now. It's time for me. So you in yourself will have been very inspiring to other people as well, even though maybe at the moment you don't feel like it. You absolutely are. So thank you very much for coming and sharing your stitchery stories with us today.
Oh, thank you very much, Sue. It's been absolutely life-changing. Lovely. Thank you.
Brilliant. Right, Annie. Before we all burst into tears, I think we'll go. Thank you very much, Annie. Cheers.
Bye-bye, Sue.
If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, then please join the Stitchery Stories fan club so you can get an email when a new episode is released. It's a quick and easy way of listening and of keeping up with any news and information around this podcast. Please visit stitcherystories.com. Of course, you can listen to Stitchery Stories on plenty of podcast apps at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify and plenty more besides. You can also ask your smart speaker to play Stitchery Stories podcast too. But wherever you listen, why not leave us a rating and a review to encourage other people to listen too? I very much appreciate you taking the time to do that for me. So that is the end of our Stitchery story for today. Keep stitching, keep smiling, and keep creating your very own Stitchery stories.